All right, so far I've built a lot of frames with just subtle changes. And now that's all building up to the next big lightning flash, right? Which is my big moment in my assets. So what do I need to do? I need to clear the last one and delete it. I need to set up that frame. So I'm going to start with where I left off with the head, right? And I'm just going to change the eyes. And I'm going to change the wrinkles. I don't have to create them. I already have these assets. And then I am going to turn on the big lightning. Which is right in the center. Going to make it bigger. Maybe right there. Because when that hits, not only is it going to be bright, but the actual head of my guy, I'm going to merge all into one, even his crown. So I'm going to select them all, hold down Shift, put them all into a group, duplicate the group, and then merge it. I actually don't even need to merge it, but I'm going to do a layer style to it. Because this is going to be so strong, it's going to darken it. So I'm going to go to color overlay, and then I'm going to make that dark. Right? And I'll play with opacity just a little bit. And I have the opacity set for dissolve. So it's a little bit grainy. So you can just barely see them. All right, so now we're going from this to this. It looks like I should probably close his eyes because it's so bright. Where are my closed eyes? There they are. This is a big, big shock to the system, right? So from that to that, all of a sudden, boom. So how do I move this over now? I go to my topmost visible layer, I select it. Then I hold down Option. While I'm holding down Option, I scroll up to Layer, and I scroll down to Merge Visible. I let go of Option. I see that it already has the layer selected. That's a new merged layer. I hit Command A to select it all. Command C to copy it all. Then I go to my stage, I make sure I'm on my top layer in my stage, and I hit Command V to paste it in. So that's my big moment. Now what's fun is I get to extend this moment a little bit. So this is how I can do that. I go back to my assets and I hit Command D to deselect, and I clear the cartridge for the Polaroid. So I'm ready to set up my next one. And to extend it, I'm going to duplicate that lightning and I'm going to flip it horizontally. Command T, flip horizontal, right? And maybe tilt it a little. And then what can I do? Well, I'm going to flicker the opacity on this to maybe only about 30%, right? Now, is that enough to go from that to that? Almost. Now, for the first time, I get to bring in my next asset, which is going to be this skull. I'm going to put it under his eyes for the time being. I'll turn off this new lightning. I'll mark it red so I remember to turn it back on. I'm just going to introduce this skull, but I'm going to duplicate it. And then I'm going to play with it and line it up with my Zeus asset, right? So I'm going to rotate it. Going to kind of line up the eyes a little. Maybe even warp it. It's weird because I'm taking a 3/4 view and making it kind of a full front view. So I just have to split the difference. It's getting there. Now there's another way I could do this, but I'll show you in a second. But I want to get a sense of kind of that skeletal setting. And what's funny is, it looks more like an octopus now than a skull, but it's kind of like his beard has bones or something. I can get away with it. All right. So now, I'm going to turn this off for now just so I can see it clearly. Instead of using the full skull at the full dimension, I have to get rid of the tongue. And I can do this pretty quickly just by, this is on a duplicate, remember? So actually maybe I'll make another duplicate just to be safe. I'm just going to lasso around the tongue. And then I'm going to do something we haven't done before. It's a little bit of a cheat, but it's a very helpful tool in Photoshop for like non-precise compositing. And instead of trying to paint this in, which I could do, I can use my paintbrush, and I could select, and I could paint it at 100% opacity, because I don't want the tongue sticking out quite yet, right? And then I can do it with this, but it's not going to match all those textures and stuff as well. So instead I'm going to go up to Edit and Fill, like we've done for white and gray. But instead of white or gray, I'm going to use Content Aware. Content Aware is like Clone Stamp, but it will fill it in. Sometimes it works really well. It's giving me a little bit too much of the eye. It's filling it in with that texture. So now let me clean up the mouth. Basically, I'm trying to make this a cleaner asset, right? So let me do it like this. And try Content Aware again. I don't think it's necessarily going to work well if it didn't work the first time, so I say Fill, Content Aware. We are not using the AI tools, but you see how it gets the texture a little bit better? What it's basically doing is doing Clone Stamp, but not in the best way. So I'm going to use my own Clone Stamp and clean it up a little bit better. Let's do it at a higher opacity, soft edged brush, just like we did for assignment 2. Then I want this in there. So there's some shadow. Then I want, let's see, this kind of edge. Carry that up. Not super clean, not super precise, because it doesn't need to be for a GIF animation. I don't want to make it worse than it was. Okay, now I'm just going to cut the shape of the mouth I want. And then I'm just going to use Clone Stamp and match it with this texture. I'm getting all these ghosts because I'm doing it at such a soft edge, but I could use harder edge if I wanted to. All right, now I just got to clean this up. I'll just use my brush for that. Clean up those edges. And then erase this out. Okay. So I also don't want the blue dots, right? Or the teardrops. So what do I need to do? I can actually use, I'll just use my lasso. I'm just going to cut them out. Cut them out. Because eventually I need to work up to where that skull appears. All right. So now what can I do? I'll duplicate that just to be sure. And now I'm going to fade out the skull a little bit. And I can play with the blending mode and see if one is helpful. Sometimes they really do the trick. It just depends. So that's kind of nice and ghostly. Luminosity. It like gets the red out of there. All right, and then maybe I'll trim this side of the skull and maybe trim a little bit in here. All right, good. So now let me turn on the lightning again and the big flash. And now you can barely see it, but from here to here, we have that skull starting to emerge. It's just kind of a little flash of that skeletal structure. Make sense? All right. I'm going to do one other thing. I'm going to take the skull and I'm going to select all the darks from it using Magic Wand with contiguous turned off. Get all those dark shapes, duplicate them, and then set that to multiply. So those get a little bit darker, and then up the opacity on that. Maybe even move it up higher. I'm going to experiment with playing with this going lower down. Maybe crackling a little bit, maybe setting it to dissolve. Duplicate it, set it to normal. Yeah, that could be fun. Then maybe duplicate the lightning and put it in between the two. So from this to that. Right? Really disruptive. Okay, now how do I bring that over as my next frame? Hold down Option, go to Layer, Merge Visible. Command A to select it all, Command C to copy it all. Click on my stage, Command V, paste it in. Now I get to reveal the consequences. And after this, I'll run another animation test. So I'll save my stage. And how do I reveal the consequences? Well, first I have to clear the cartridge. And I have to start taking down, get rid of the lightning. Aha. And take down the opacity on this. So it kind of shows. But the problem is, it's got all that kind of crackly energy in the sky, which is really beautiful, but isn't consistent with my earlier frames. So what I want is the kind of crackle on the head, but not the sky. So how can I keep that? What I can do is select around my head. Where is he? Here he is. Select around this by using the magic wand. Just going to merge this group. And then delete that from this crackle layer. Right. The other nice thing about that is I can use that and darken it. So I can take this now and I can do image levels and make it darker.